Hey, Judy.
Yes.
Do you remember when we went to Hawaii?
Oh, yeah. I mean, how could I forget?
It was wonderful, an unforgettable trip, and we got to see and do so much.
Yeah, it was truly amazing. I loved that trip.
You know what was really kind of fun, though? At the end, when we could share our stories, and we've heard from so many people who were planning to do the same trip that we were doing. It was so cool to be able to be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
But we got so many good questions. We wanted just to take a few minutes and go over the top questions we got after sharing our trip to Hawaii. Hi, my name's Erling.
Hi, I'm Judy, and welcome to Travel Trail Sail.
And today we're going to share some of the top questions that we got about our videos on our trip to Hawaii.
All right, question number 1. When did we visit Hawaii? So we went in the month of October, and we had fabulous weather. It was nice and warm. We could wear shorts, t-shirts every day. It never rained. Sunny and beautiful every day. So we were very fortunate.
And, weather can change. Your experience if you went in October might be different. Or you could go some other month and have a great experience. Hawaii does have pretty nice weather. But our trip was fabulous in terms of weather. There was only one time when we had to bundle up just a little bit. We did do the sunset at Haleakala, and it gets a little chilly after dark up on the top of the mountain. So we did have to wear hats and jackets. But other than that, weather on our trip in October was
perfect. I mean, we couldn't ask for better weather.
Absolutely.
All right, question number 2. How long was our trip? So our trip was 12 days total. We had 3 days in Waikiki before the cruise, and then 2 days after the cruise in Ko'olina. So that really worked out well for us. We highly recommend, if you can, to go at least a couple days before the cruise, just to be sure you make it in time. You have plenty of time to catch the cruise, and also you have time to get used to the time difference, which can be quite a bit. But if we had to choose one of those, the pre-stay or the post-stay, definitely pre-stay at least a couple days before the cruise.
Another question we often got is, what stateroom did you stay in? Well, we stayed on deck 9 and towards the rear of the ship on the port side. There's a block of rooms, 9666 to 9696, that we think are really ideal for this particular ship. And there's a few reasons for that. There's staterooms above and below you. You're not near a bar or a pool or some other noisy area, so that helps with quiet at night. Those rooms are also behind the stairs and elevators. There's no place else to go. So you won't have a lot of people walking past your room trying to get somewhere else on the ship. So for us, that was great. It was also a balcony stateroom, so we had a small balcony with 2 chairs and a table. Great to have that little bit of outside space where we could enjoy the view. People also asked, is port side or starboard better? Well, for us, they're both going to be great, because as you're sailing into the islands in the morning or leaving in the evening, you're going to have a great view of the islands and the scenery around you. There was only one place that we thought port might be a little bit better, and that was in Kauai, where all the ports in Hawaii are working ports. But in Kauai, we had a nice view of kind of the mountainside and a harbor. It was just a really nice view.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
So I think for us, port side, rear part of the ship, deck 9, worked out fantastic.
All right, another question that we often got was, did we encounter rough seas? And for us, it was very smooth sailing, I have to say. No problem there. Now, the cruise that we took, it goes out from Honolulu and it cruises around the island. So it doesn't go way out into the Pacific Ocean. So it was very smooth sailing for us, no problems with rough seas. Now, if you're cruising, say, from San Diego across the Pacific Ocean, you may encounter some rough waters.
And you could even in Hawaii. I mean, the water could act up or the weather, but during our trip, it was smooth sailing.
It was great. Now, if you are concerned about rough seas and seasickness, if you're considering which room you should get, if you get a lower deck and a room more in the middle of the ship, that will help with any kind of motion sickness if there are rough seas.
Right. In our case, the roughest that we encountered was actually on the road to Hana.
Yes.
That's when we needed the Dramamine.
And the ginger.
And the ginger. But on the cruise itself, it was smooth sailing for us. Another question we got is it better to do the NCL Pride of America cruise among the Hawaiian Islands or just stay at a resort on one of the islands? Well, it really is going to depend. The Hawaiian Islands, what we encountered was they were all very different. And being on the cruise, we were able to sample the best of Hawaii. Now, would a resort stay be great? I bet it would.
Sure.
Each of the islands was beautiful in its own way, but we really didn't know which island we wanted to visit, and so the cruise gave us that opportunity to explore and give it a try. If we went back, would we do the cruise or stay in a resort? How about yes and? They'd both be great options, right? But I'm glad we did the cruise so that we could explore and try different islands.
Right, and you could stay on one island and then fly from one island to another, but we really like the idea of a cruise ship because you unpack once and you're done, right? You don't have to pack and unpack
Made it
several
very
times.
easy, yeah.
Yes. All right, the 7th question here, are there any excursions you would do on your own? And I would say our first excursion was to Pearl Harbor when we were staying in Waikiki, and I would say that is one you could definitely do on your own. You can make reservations online, and it's very easy to find transportation to Pearl Harbor. So I would definitely say that's one we could have done on our own.
Absolutely. Another one is we did Haleakala. Now, we did the sunset, and I'm so glad we did that as an excursion. But if we were going to visit there in the daytime, we could rent a car, go there, and have more time to explore on our own. I just didn't want to drive down the mountain road after dark. So I'm glad we did that sunset one as an excursion. But if we were visiting that area in the daytime, you could absolutely do it on your own.
Yep, that's right. And it got very dark very fast.
It did.
Another excursion that we did that we could probably do on our own is the luau in Kauai. It was in the evening. It was a great luau. The show was so great. The food was fabulous. But we've heard that, there are many luau's in Hawaii that you can reserve on your own. So that is probably one that we would have done on our own, looking back.
Absolutely. Now, people talk about, excursions versus renting a car. So if you were going to do the luau, you would need some way to get there. And so sometimes people do rent a car, and especially when the ship stays overnight, that might work out better. We did rent a car one day on Kauai. It was fantastic. We were able to go to see Waimea Canyon, stop by a coffee plantation, but we had more time to explore, where if we had booked the excursion to Waimea Canyon, we would have been pretty limited and wouldn't have been able to do as much exploring as we did. So that would be probably one that we think doing on your own might be a good option.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one excursion that I was very happy we did, and I would not do on my own, is the road to Hana. Many people do it, but on their own, but it's such a windy road that I think it would be exhausting to drive that, going up and then coming back down. So I'm glad we did that as an excursion.
And if you enjoy driving on windy, twisty roads, you might very well like to drive that on your own. But I think we enjoyed the experience a lot more letting somebody else do the driving.
Absolutely.
Another question we got is, when did we book our excursions? Now, we actually booked them several months in advance. We typically were trying to book 1 or 2 of the excursions each month, pay them off, and make sure that we were paid in full by the time we took our cruise. Again, you can go on to NCL and you can pick your particular cruise and see the excursions that are available. If you see one that you like, go ahead and book it. The prices on those excursions, what we've been seeing is that they can go up and down. Sometimes the cruise lines will change the price. So If your price of your excursion goes down, you may be able to ask to have it rebooked at the lower price. And potentially watch for some sales. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it may be possible that there are sales on the excursions. So that's some tips on when to book your excursions. Typically starting before you go on the cruise, maybe a few months in advance.
Another question that we got regarding excursions was if lunch was provided. And oftentimes lunch was provided. It was usually a box lunch, and that was all ready. The tour guide would hand them out at the right time in the tour that everyone could sit down and enjoy. We often had access to picnic tables and sometimes a magnificent view while we were having lunch. So that was really nice. Now the box lunch was, pretty basic. It included a sandwich, chips, and a drink, but it was plenty to keep you going, for the rest of the tour. So be sure to read the description of the excursion to see if lunch is included. One of the questions that we got was if there is a formal night on the Pride of America. And the Pride of America is a fairly casual cruise ship. Many men would wear slacks and polo shirts or Hawaiian shirts. Women often wore like sundresses or casual dresses or pants and a blouse. The most dressed up we would see would be if people were dining in the specialty dining areas, and that might be like a sport coat or something like that. So it's actually a very casual cruise ship.
If you wore something like this, just a Hawaiian shirt, you'll be perfectly fine. Thinking of that cruise ship experience, another question we got is what's there to do on the ship and how late do things stay open? Well, in the evenings, there's a main theater that'll typically have some kind of entertainment. That could be a comedian, or some nights they were showing a movie. And then throughout the bars on the ship, there's musicians, maybe a solo act or a duet. So that's the kind of entertainment you might expect. There's no casino. The shows were pretty basic, not the big production Broadway kind of shows. Sometimes the cruise director staff would put on games that were really fun. The Not So Newlywed Game or those kind of typical games that you'd expect to see on a cruise ship. Lots of fun. But things do tend to wind down fairly early on this ship. A lot of the bars start closing as early as 10, and I think one of them may stay open until midnight, but typically things are closing down relatively early for a cruise ship. Speaking of things to do and staying up late, another question we got is, can you leave the ship at night? Well, there are a couple of ports where the ship actually stays in port overnight. And people wanted to know, can I get off to go out to a nice restaurant at night? Can I get off the ship early so I can go catch the sunrise somewhere? Our understanding is, and it wasn't communicated very effectively, is that security is open all night and you should be able to come and go as you please, almost as if you're staying in a hotel. So yes, our understanding is you can leave the ship and come and go as you please, but make sure to check and ask before you make any big plans. Can you use Uber or Lyft? That was another question. Can you use a ride-sharing app? And that really broke down into two different ways people were asking the question. One is, could you use one of those ride-sharing services to get to the cruise ship or to leave on your last day? And the answer is yes. You actually can use Uber or Lyft as a way to get from your hotel to the cruise ship. In fact, we did that. We used Lyft at the end of our cruise to get to our post-cruise hotel stay. The other way people ask that, though, is when you're in port, could you use Uber or Lyft to get to something like a restaurant or a shopping venue? Possibly. These cruises are, the cruise ship is stopping in working ports, and so there is some security. There are typically a spot just outside of that secured zone that's the ride-sharing pickup and drop-off point. On our website, I'm going to put a link to a blog post where somebody has actually identified all the different ride-sharing stops for each port. So that might be a handy guide if you're planning to do this. But I would suggest doing a little bit of research. You'll want to know that there's a place that you want to actually go. Again, unlike in the Caribbean where there's a lot of activities just off the ship, the distances can vary. So maybe just pull up a map on your phone or on your computer to determine, is there something worth visiting that's close? And then you could plan your Uber or Lyft transportation to get to it.
So you board the ship, and then what do? Right? So that was one of the questions we received was, what do I do when I get on board? So there are so many options. I would suggest getting on board as soon as possible, as early as possible, so you can really enjoy the ship before it sails off. But there are so many things you could do. We went to one of the main dining areas to have lunch, which was good. You know, you could get lunch. You can tour the boat, which is what we did, is just to get our bearings. So we walked around the ship, tried to find where everything was, and just kind of check it out. So that's what we did when we boarded the ship. But there are lots of other options. Mm-hmm. Many people just went straight to the pool. And if you're going to do that, definitely go early and go straight to the pool because it was packed. It was,
and it gets really sunny. At least when we were there on the day when we boarded the ship, it was hot and sunny, and there aren't that many sites with shade. So if you're heading to the pool, maybe head straight there.
Right, yeah, so that's an option. We also saw people in the library and just enjoying some quiet time before the cruise started. And then there's always the option to start enjoying your drink package and hitting the bar. So we saw people, hanging out at the bar before they could get into their cabin. So lots of options when you first board the ship.
And your cabin probably won't be ready right away. So think of what you want to do for the first few hours on your own. Maybe pick one of those things Judy listed, the library, the bar, the pool, and just go and kind of relax and have a good start to your cruise. Then around 5:30 or so, there'll probably be a sail away party. What we experienced was that there's a little stage by the pool area. They had Hawaiian music, hula dancing, and it was a really nice way to start the cruise, a little sail away party. From there, we actually headed back to the aft part of the ship and just enjoyed watching the cruise, sail away from Honolulu, watching the sunset, and it was just a really nice, relaxing way to start the trip.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend doing that after the sail away party because from the aft, it was a beautiful view of Honolulu, and and then you can watch the ship. It actually has to do like a 360-degree turn in the harbor to get out. So it was so cool. So I would highly recommend doing that.
Absolutely. Probably the most frequent question we got is, how much did this trip cost? I'm not going to lie. This is a once-in-a-lifetime bucket list dream vacation for most. And Hawaii is not going to be your least expensive destination. So be prepared to perhaps spend more on a vacation than you will ever on any other trip you take. But that being said, there's a lot of variables that come into play when determining how much it costs. So I think the best thing to do is for us to give you kind of a framework that you can think about what some of the variables are, and then you'll need to do some research to figure out how much it's actually going to cost for you. One of the things that we've learned is the sooner you can book a cruise, the earlier you book it, the better chance you are to get the best price. Now, cruise prices are always going up and down, and if you book a cruise at a certain price and that price goes up, well, you've got the best price. But if that price goes down, you can actually contact the cruise line or your travel agent and ask them to adjust the price. So you really can't lose. Book early is one of the best ways to save some money. The other variable on the ship itself are things like the stateroom that you book. An inside cabin is likely to be less expensive than a balcony. So you have to decide, is the balcony worth it for you? Price out some different options and just see how much extra it would cost for the balcony room. Then you factor in things like airfare. Depending on where you're flying from, or if you can use points or miles or other ways to save money, that air could cost a lot or maybe not be so bad. A lot of people like on this long flight to upgrade from coach to a higher class of service. If you can fly a coach, you'll save a little bit of money. Then we've talked about some of the excursions that we did, and that's an area, again, where it's highly variable. We booked excursions through the cruise line and had a great experience with that. However, if you do choose to rent a car and do some exploring on your own, it may be an area to save a little bit of money on your trip. And then finally, for that post-cruise stay or pre-cruise stay, there's so many different hotel options in different price ranges. So the best thing you can do is kind of pick a time of the year. Do you want to go in the fall or the spring? Start pricing it out, start seeing what the variables are in terms of the room and the air and how it all comes together for you. So to summarize, it is an expensive trip, but for us, we had a fantastic time and it really was worth it. So we're glad we took this dream trip to Hawaii. And that brings us to the last question people asked us, which was, how was the Wi-Fi on board? Not gonna lie, not great. We really didn't use it. There is Wi-Fi on board. We had a package as part of our cruise, and we tried using it. In fact, we even tried having the person who's at the IT desk try and help us use it, but we just found it was a little bit too complicated. And because this is a port-heavy itinerary, we didn't really need it. During the daytime, we could keep in touch with our friends and family when we were in port, and so we just opted not really to use the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I agree. The Wi-Fi was not great.
So that's some of the more popular questions or more frequently asked questions that we got from all of you. And we really do thank you for all of those. I know a lot of you were planning cruises and you probably learned a lot of tips that you can share. So please leave a comment. Share your favorite tips from your Hawaii vacation or your Pride of America cruise so that we can all learn from it. We did have at least one other tip somebody recommended. We probably should have shared this in our tips video. That is, get trip insurance.
Yes,
super
absolutely.
important. You don't know, life can happen, something can come up, and having trip insurance in place in case you need to change your plans, super important. So thanks for that reminder and recommendation. We absolutely agree. Get trip insurance. Well, thanks again for all of your engagement, all the questions and the posts that you've done. It really means a lot to us that we were able to share our journey and that you all found it useful, and really do appreciate that. So again, if you've taken a cruise that's similar to this one, let us know how it went. And if our tips or information was useful to you, we'd love to hear about it. But maybe you found something that we didn't share, again, another question that we missed or a tip. We'd love to have you leave a comment, share it out to our community. It really does help all of us, and we really appreciate it. So Judy.
Yes.
Hawaii was so much fun.
Oh, I loved Hawaii. I loved Hawaii so much. Can we go again?
I'd love to go again. It was so much fun. And the thing is, we've got a bucket list of all these great adventures, and just stay tuned because we may have some more fun content coming up later this year. So we'd love to have you like and subscribe so you don't miss it. So thanks again for joining us. Look forward to seeing you on our next adventure.